Shalom and good day all. This is Tehillim29 back again for another DC review. And in this DC review, yes, I'm covering two super titles. And starting off with the first one being Superman by Joshua Williamson, and moving into the next one, Superman, Man of Tomorrow. Or Superboy, Man of Tomorrow. Correction there. So I'll now get things organized for the first one that I'll be covering. So for the first one I'll be covering will be Joshua Williamson's Superman. And starting with first things first, does this cover in any way, shape, or form, in any way connect to something that is happening inside of the story? Sure enough, it does, to which I give a 7.5 out of 10. But it's not the way that you expect or how you see it here. So it's now time to move into the internal art, which we'll have a look around the beginning, middle, and of course the end. So as we start to move into the beginning of the story, we find out that Superman has become basically Parasite. Parasite has turned him into one of his group, so almost like a zombie. And it almost reminds me of sort of like what happened with Deceased with Superman, but this is actually done with the character of Parasite. And I think with that, it makes a little bit more sense, considering his character is desperate for power. As we move a little bit further, we notice that the character of Livewire is making their appearance here and will be used to somewhat help Superman. As we start to jump towards the middle of the story, we do get to see some of the home life with Clark Kent and the rest of the family members. And of course, Lex Luthor, to which now Clark Kent, or aka Superman, also has some questions for Lex Luthor as to why he helped him. So we move towards the end of the story, and we somehow get the return of, or we get a supervillain coming into the scene, which will be interesting as to how that will play out in the next issue. So for the art in this issue, I gave it a 7 out of 10 for the internal. Now it's time to move in relation to the story rating. So for things to be meeting up in the story rating, and considering how long Joshua Williamson has been writing comics at DC, this will require comic book references. So do we get any comic book references? Sure enough, we do. To which we get a reference to the previous issue, so Superman issue 2. Next is the area of time, to which we got none of, though it would not hurt to include it. Next is the location, to which a lot of this takes place in Metropolis. The cast of characters consisting of Lex Luthor, of course, Superman, Clark Kent, Livewire, of course, Parasite. We had the character of Mercy. We had Supergirl, the imposter John Kent, of course. Jimmy Olsen, and last but not least, the character known as Dr. Farm that was seen at the end of the story. For the overall rating, I gave it a 7 out of 10. I hope by the next issue it will increase in story rating, but we'll have to hold out until then. So now it's time to move into Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow. So let's see how DC went with this compared to the Son of Kal-El run. And I must admit, there's already a big difference between the two runs, including the adventures of John Kent run. So, first things first, let's move into the area of the cover. Does this cover in any way, shape, or form connect to something that is happening inside with the story? Sure enough, it does. to which I give a 7.5. As you can see, he's carrying a bit of a duffel bag, which seems to indicate that he's actually going to be going on a bit of a journey. And does this journey take place in the story? You bet it does. So we already know what's happening by the indication of the cover, and it also does serve well when we move to the internal art and also what's happening story-wise. So as we move into the art in relation to the story, we have, of course, Connor Kent, Kara, and John Kent making their appearances around the beginning of the story as he's trying to help out in Metropolis. As we jump a little bit further into the story, we see that he travels to planet Drago as he's following what is happening with the characters of the Dominion. We catch up with this particular strange group, and I think they're connected to the Dominion by the looks of things. As our story advances, we get to see a lot of what is happening on planet Drago. And of course, last but not least, he meets up with another group of somewhat outlawish type characters. So for the internal art, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time to move in relation to the area of the story. And seeing that this is a first issue, I don't really expect any comic references to be used. But you know what? The storyteller put in a comic reference. So that was really good. And sure enough, we do get a comic reference, and that is to Action Comics, or a little bit before Action Comics 1051. So that was really good, and I'm glad that they put that in there, because at least it lets us, the reader, know when this event is starting to take place. So basically around issue 150 to 151, so somewhere in between there. The next is the area of time, to which, of course, we didn't get any particular indication of time, whether it was meanwhile or if it was Thursday or Friday, whenever. Next is the area of locations. So we had downtown Metropolis to begin with in the story. Then we went to the Kent farm in Smallville. We eventually dropped to the Fortress of Solitude at the Arctic Circle. As he was at the Fortress of Solitude, he was overlooking things and trying to find out what's happening with like some of his friends. We learned that some of his friends are around the Pacific Ocean, Central City, Paris, France, and of course, last but not least, planet Drago, to where he travels to. The cast consisting of Connor Kent, Superboy, Dr. Dolores, or Dr. Polaris, one of them. We had Supergirl, we had John Kent, we had Ma and Pa Kent, we also had Calyx, we had Dormaritus, and the Cosmoteers. For the overall story rating in this, I'm surprised to say this, but the story rating in this actually went a little bit higher than the previous comic that I just covered before, to which I give a 7.5 out of 10. I'd probably be willing to go back and check the next issue in this series. And I think that this was written way better than both Adventures of John Kent by Tom Taylor and also Son of Kal-El. And it's a really good start. The fact that I do want to go back and check up the next issue, I'd say the writer did a really good job to sort of like put some effort in regards to his character research and how to make it work with present characters in the DC universe. So until then, let's keep it colorful and have yourself an awesome day.